Okay, a call to order, the Yamhill County Board of Commissioners formal session for May 25th, 2023. It is 10:04 in the morning. And I will go ahead and lead us in the flag salute. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. Welcome, former Commissioner Casey Cooled there in the back. Okay, item C is our calendar session. Commissioners, anything to add to the calendar?
We did add the McMinnville City State of the City
State of the
address
city.
tonight.
Yep,
That's all I had.
that's all you had. All right.
This one, yeah.
Item D is public comment. This time period is reserved for public comment on any topic other than an agenda item, a quasi judicial land use matter, or a topic scheduled for a public hearing. So if you're in the audience and you have general public comment, please come forward at this time. If you're online, please raise your virtual hand. Okay, seeing and hearing none. And I don't believe we received any written comments, so we will move forward to item E, which is our department updates. There's nothing today. There's nothing on the work session calendar today. Our consent agenda. Let's see. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Okay. For item 7, are you familiar with the pool spa program license?
Yes,
What-
that
can you
is,
explain
those
what that is?
rates are set by the state. And so
Okay.
it's not something generated by the county to increase the fees. And there are between 44 and 48 facilities that would be impacted according to our HHS director.
So the fees are doubling. It was
They're
pretty
doubling, and
significant.
those are set by the state.
Interesting. Okay.
Mhm.
Okay, any further discussion on the consent agenda? Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item H is old business. There's nothing today. Item I, other business. I1 is consideration of approval of a proposed rate increase of 11% as recommended by the Yamhill County Solid Waste Department and the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, or SWAC, for waste management of the Newburgh Transfer Station, effective July 1st of 2023. And we have some representatives here from Recology in case there are questions, correct? Yes?
For Recology, but
Not for waste management. Okay. Let's see. That is item 3. Okay. Commissioners, any questions on item I1? And this was a unanimous recommendation
This
by
was
SWAC.
unanimous and it's because we're rural, but most of the cities that they go around requesting the rate increase have been around, I think, 4 or 5%, depending on what city it is. We're rural, so we're a little bit more expensive. And again, rates going up for dumping fees, fuel costs,
Right.
labor,
Mhm.
trucks having issues. I mean, they've had issues getting trucks for almost 2 years now on some of them, so it's the same thing everybody else is running into.
I did notice I'm not sure if it was that contract, but there was a couple different mentions of unsecured load fee. There was a $25 mention and then a $15. Did
That
you
doesn't
get
ring
any?
a bell with me.
No, okay. Alrighty. Do I have a motion to approve item I1?
So moved.
Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I2, consideration of approval of a proposed rate increase of 9.75% as recommended by the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, SWAC, for waste management of Newburgh hauling, effective July 1st, 2023. And again, some of the same concerns between supply chain issues, collective bargaining agreements, fuel costs, a whole slew of issues, increasing their costs.
I would move approval, Chair.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
None.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. Item I3, consideration of approval of a proposed rate increase of 5% by Yamhill County Solid Waste Department for Recology, Western Oregon, effective July 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2024. And again, if there's any questions, we do have representatives here. But it looks like some of the same cost drivers are applying to this rate increase. I will move approval of item I3. Is there further discussion?
None.
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. And thank you for coming, even though it was brief.
Thank you.
Item I4, consideration of approval to authorize Community Justice to submit an application for the first phase of the Justice Reinvestment Initiative, or JRI grant, to the Criminal Justice Commission for the 2023-25 biennium. And Commissioners, this is phase one of a two-part process. This is the narrative phase. The next phase will be the budget phase. And as you know, this is for the Smart Sentencing Prison Diversion Program, as well as our pretrial justice programs. And we've received grant funds from this mechanism for the last 5 biennia. So we stand a good chance of receiving them again. I will move approval of item I4. Is there further discussion?
None.
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes. Item I5, consideration of opening a sealed bid for tax lot number R5635AB 00801, county-owned tax foreclosed real property. And this is the infamous trampoline property, backyard trampoline property.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
We're just gonna have I'm gonna ask Noelle to put a picture of the property up on the screen if she can hear me. But this is, yes, this is the notorious property we've talked about a couple times, I think. This is the same neighbor that submitted a bid last time for both properties, but it looks like they only submitted a bid for the one property running straight through their backyard.
Yeah, right.
So shall I proceed?
You shall.
Okay.
Thank you.
It's too late.
It should be okay. We reviewed
It's fine.
which one it
Okay.
is. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, so it looks like we have a bid from Christopher George and Michaela George for $200. And a letter. It's just kind of long, so I can read it if you'd like. Looks like it's multiple pages, so. I can get a copy to the board unless you want me to read it out loud. I'll just get you a copy.
Yeah.
For
The
the
only thing
record.
I would be concerned about is if in the letter, if there's concern over the property behind that we are talking about today with the city of Sheridan. That would be the only issue.
I mean, it does look like they reference the second property, but it's more about their upkeep of it, of their portion of it, I presume.
Okay.
It goes into a lot of detail.
Okay.
I don't think any of it would necessarily affect. Yeah. I'm quoting, a large portion of lot 1400 falls within the fenced area of our yard. My husband and I simply wish to maintain the fence line as it currently stands. So that's sort of
Okay,
the
that's a
basis.
secondary issue with
Yeah,
our agreement.
but I don't
Okay.
think it should affect the sale that's coming up
Yeah.
later today.
Okay.
So I will get a copy of this, to you guys, though.
Okay. You need a motion to approve the bid,
Accept the bid, yeah.
accept the bid. Do I have a motion?
I move approval of accepting the bid.
Any further discussion or questions?
None.
Thanks, Jody, for working on
Okay,
this.
thank
Thank you.
Really.
Okay, all those in favor of accepting the sealed bid for tax lot number R 5635AB 00801, signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Thank you, and I'm glad we could finally get that
Wait, can you stay for the?
moving forward.
I will come back.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Item I6, consideration of approval of a contract employee agreement between Yamhill County and David J. Young for electrical and building inspection services not to exceed 20 hours per week, retroactive to April 24th, 2023 through July 1st of 2024 at a rate of $46 per hour. And commissioners, this is for our immediate need of coverage for inspections, especially during construction season. So this will kind of fill the gap until we get another person hired. So I will move approval of item I6. Is there further discussion?
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. Item 7 is consideration of the agreement between Yamhill County Health and Human Services and Barry Dunn for HHS electronic health record consulting services not to exceed $523,365 retroactive to May 1st of 2023 through June 30th of 2025.
Chair, I would move approval.
Okay, is there further discussion?
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Item I8, consideration of approval of amendment number 1 to a lease extension between Yamhill County and Crown Castle LLC for the continued operation of a cell tower on the county fairgrounds. And I believe Colton worked on this agreement.
Yeah, he's been working on this and he attended the most recent Fair Board meeting
Mhm.
and had a discussion with the Fair Board about this. And they were comfortable with this moving forward, and that's why it's before you today. And this is for the not the tower that's in the corner of the
Yeah.
Public Works field, but it's the tower that's sort of further back onto the fairgrounds property, right adjacent to the railroad tracks.
Okay. And this is reducing the monthly rent a little bit, but it's also
It
adding in
is.
a revenue share, which
That's
wasn't
right.
there before, so.
That's right.
Okay, sounds like a good adjustment. I will move approval of item I8. Is there further discussion?
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you. Motion passes.
Thank you. Thank you, Colton.
Item I9 is consideration of approval to sign a multi-jurisdictional letter to Governor Kotek regarding the Mossman order. And commissioners, there were several letters attached to that email that in the packet, but it is the specific letter dated March 17th of 2023 to the Honorable Tina Kotek. And basically just goes through some suggestions as to how the state can help us deal with some of the impacts immediately from the Mossman order. As you know, we joined the technical term, we are part of the MEC, right?
We are filing a motion today to
Filing a motion
allow,
today.
it's being filed on behalf of Yamhill County, Clackamas County, and Deschutes County. Hopefully the court will allow us to participate in those federal lawsuits as amicus.
This letter is just, I think it's an attempt to have the state kind of come in the gap and help solve some of the immediate issues. So if we approve this, technically our logo, county logo would be sent to Marion County to add. So I will move approval of item I9. Is there further discussion?
None.
None.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, thank you. Motion passes. Okay, we are on to our public hearings. Item J1 is a public hearing to hear objections to the transfer of certain tax foreclosed real properties to the city of Sheridan pursuant to the provisions of ORS 271.330, and the specific properties to be transferred are number 1, tax lot number R5635AB 01400, tax account number 307643. Number 2, tax lot number R5635BD 02300, tax account number 224037. Number 3, tax lot number R5634AA 07500, tax account number 226053. Number 4, tax lot number R5634AA 07500, tax account number 226428. So we will open the public hearing. And I will ask for any public comments in relation to these 4 properties. Okay, hearing.
We have one in our audience.
Oh, hi, come on up and if you would. If you could please state your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Christopher George, and my address is 336 Northeast Elm Street, Sheridan.
Great.
We have the apparently notorious trampoline property.
Yes.
We know it well.
We know it well.
My wife and I have been following these meetings, and it's been as much of a headache for us as it's been for you guys to figure out what's going on with
Yeah.
those. So 801 is now out of the way, which is great. I don't know all the information for what's been said about the sale of 1400 to Sheridan and any contingencies on that, or if there's going to be lot adjustments. But in that letter that my wife and I drafted up, we do have pictures showing how invasive that property is on our backyard. And so if it was just sold to the city of Sheridan and that property was no longer existing in our backyard, we'd lose about half of it. And then our corresponding neighbors on the other side of the ditch would also lose probably about 20% of their yards.
Right.
So like I said, I don't know what all has been discussed and what the plan is, but I just wanted to be here to represent and answer any questions there might be.
Yeah, I appreciate that. So we had several concerns about that specifically. One of my questions for the hearing is to make sure that all of the neighbors surrounding this property have been made aware that this is something that we are talking about. And then the secondary issue is what's the language that we've included to protect the property owners? Jason.
And so I wish Noelle was able to be promoted. I don't know if we sent notice to all of the surrounding property owners, but we, the sale to the city of Sheridan is going to be, at least for lot 1400, is going to be subjected to a requirement that they go through a lot line adjustment, moving those lots to whatever line the fences are on for all the neighbors, because it touches, I think, 4 neighbors, not just you and your back ones. It's touching 4. So that is going to be a requirement that the city go through that process with each of the landowners in order, so you don't lose your backyard.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know how clear the pictures are online because there's a lot of overgrown trees and stuff on the backside, but my wife and I have been the only ones maintaining that area for the 3 years that we've been there. And in fact, we've actually reached out to the city, the Sheridan Public Works, to help us, and they didn't want any part of it. So that's kind of what brought us to the table, like asking questions like who actually owns it and whatnot. So if the city of Sheridan officially purchases that and the lots that are adjusted to the fence lines, that's fine because everybody maintains their backyards, but who maintains that area that's overgrown with shrubs and trees that are falling and all sorts of other things in there?
So that will fall on the city. So it is, from what they told us, it's a drainage lot for them.
Yeah.
So they are under an obligation to take care of it because they're both, managing the drainage, but also because they're now going to be the property owners. So it'll be on them.
But the concern came last time because the 2 other lots adjoining to this, it's going to make it landlocked for Sheridan to be able to go take care of it.
Is that how it
will-
functions? It's pretty much landlocked between the fences?
That's what it seems to be, yeah.
Okay, so how do you guys manage it? How do you get access?
Well, we have a
The-
gate access inside our backyard area.
Okay, through a
but,
gate, okay.
Yeah, in order to get back there, you'd have to go through the front of our property and then go
Right.
back to property.
So I
Okay.
guess if they were okay with it and that there was also a deal made with Sheridan that they could get access through their yard to maintain at least this little square, if that's a concern,
Mhm.
that would be the only way that Sheridan would be able to.
Well, I mean,
'cause-
technically, we don't have a way to maintain it either.
Right.
So, yes, but that is going to be between you and the city of Sheridan. That will sort of be for you two to work out. I'll be honest, they've been super easy to work with. And it shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
That famous last words, of course, but
Is it something that we can add to the language to say that there also needs to be,
we
I don't
can't,
know if it's technically an easement, but some type of access agreement?
we can't because it's his property
Okay.
that's the easement would be going over.
Yeah.
So we don't really have the authority to grant an easement over his property.
Well, let's go worst case scenario as far as maintenance of the property. You've already been maintaining it?
Yeah.
Are you okay still maintaining it? If Sheridan's like, we're okay with you being on our property as in the city of Sheridan, maintaining it?
So
Or
long
do
as
you want them-
liability issues are taken care of and things associated with that. Because back 2 years ago when we had that ice storm, there was several large trees in there and they just kind of fell on our fences and caused a bunch of damage. And there wasn't really responsibility taken from anybody because nobody wanted to touch it since it wasn't owned by anybody except Yamhill County. So
Right.
aside from that, then yeah, that's fine. There might also be a way to build some sort of access on the south side, closer to where the park is, because our property backyard has that fenced gate area that you can get access to about halfway through the lot. The southwest side, the neighbors don't have any fence there, so that might actually be easier to get access. But then on the far south side, where there's like a triplex property, there might be a way to build in like a easement into there. So there might be a couple different options depending on how the city wants to approach that.
Okay. So as far as our authority goes, though, we can only stipulate that the city has to work on lot line adjustments.
We can stipulate anything we'd like, but it would be unusual to stipulate you shall come up with a maintenance agreement with the owner. I mean, we could.
But worst case, he is willing to maintain it as long as there's no liability. Because he's maintaining it now.
I think it's probably to your benefit to maintain it, so yeah, that's probably where why you have been maintaining it, not necessarily because you're doing it on our behalf, but because it was beneficial to you, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of overgrown shrubs, and like I said, there's the down tree, there's still remnants of that storm. Blackberries are pretty invasive out there, but can't really till the soil because it's got a bit of a mound that would probably collapse into the drainage ditch. So it's just more of keeping everything at bay so it doesn't encroach on our property fence line.
Have you had discussions with the city at all beyond the initial who owns what?
Yeah, we've actually had the city of Sheridan Public Works come out and tell us that they normally do maintain those trenches along with the continued trench line for the two adjacent neighbors on the north side that own that property section, but is still part of that line. And this was back in 2020 and 2021. They were telling us that it was unlikely that someone would be coming out because normally they have inmate crews come out and work the ditches and clear them out. But due to COVID, that really put delays on plans, but they haven't been out since, even after follow-up contact. So that's 3 years now it's been unmaintained, which at that point, it was just me and my wife dealing with the problem. We have also, besides like trying to figure out who would fix and repair issues and maintain the properties and the whole trench line, my wife and I have also tried to reach out and figure out who owns the property through Sheridan, through Yamhill County, and we kind of got bounced around a lot of phone tag for a while. We do have call logs showing that this was back in 2021, and then it kind of felt like it stalled out and we couldn't go anywhere until we got a letter saying, hey, we're gonna try to sell off this tax lot. And I was like, okay, so looks like people are looking at it now.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I mean,
Sounds like we're okay, other than maybe a maintenance agreement or something with Sheridan if we're allowed to put that part as a stipulation. or not maintenance agreement, but liability, if he's offering to take care of it.
Between the city.
I think that would be between the city of Sheridan and the owners. I don't.
Do we put this on hold until they connect? And see if,
I have a question. So just based on the wording, the boundary lines were going to be moved associated with where the fence lines are for property owners. The southwest property doesn't have a fence line technically, so I don't know how that plays out, but with ours, we have about 5 to 6 feet beyond the fence before you hit that trenched area. So if the adjustment, at least on our side, was up to that point where it starts leveling off and becomes a trench, then that kind of takes care of any liability or risk stuff, and we maintain that area.
So the language that's actually in the deed, it just says with the respective property lines as they're obvious. So I don't think I actually put the word fence in there. So
Okay.
you'll just need to work that out with the city. And it'll be a process because I'm assuming they have a whole process for lot line adjustments. So at that point is when you sort of decide where you want that line to land.
Okay.
So you can move it where you need to. I tried to keep it as broad as I could in the deed so that I didn't restrict that sort of conversation from happening between the property owner and the city.
Okay.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm trying to find it so we can actually read what's in there. Sure. Just for clarification.
I have it. Do you want a copy of this? Is that what you're looking for?
Of the actual. Nope. So it says, condition required for sale of tax lot 1400. Conveyance of tax lot number 1400 shall be conditioned on the city of Sheridan engaging in lot line adjustments with those adjacent owners whose properties visibly encroach on the subject lot. The purpose of such adjustments shall be to align the properties so that each adjacent property owner is granted ownership over that portion of the subject tax lot, which visibly encompasses their respective curtilage. So it doesn't say anything about fence lines specifically. And so I think for me, that's pretty clear that this is something that the city of Sheridan is, it's a condition. They have to do it. They have to work with adjacent property owners.
It sounds like we'll have to talk to them and
So
negotiate out what
then
looks
that
like.
process,
Yep.
yeah. And I would just say, if that process starts to get kind of sticky and complicated, I would invite you to come back to us and invite us to be part of that process too with the city to make sure that they understand what our intent is with this. So. But beyond that, I don't know that we can add any more
no,
conditions.
I agree. And I think the most important thing is if you got any questions or need help, just reach out to us. We'll see if we can't connect the dots for you.
Great.
Yeah,
We
they're
appreciate that.
buying these 4 properties as a package, so it's kind of a part of a larger package, but this is the one that we had the most concern over, obviously, so.
Yeah.
Okay, does that answer all your questions? I want to make
Yes, thank
sure.
you.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, so if there is no further public comment, we will close the public hearing. Okay.
you.
And thank you, Mr. George. And now we will consider item 1A, which is consideration of approval in the matter of a board order declaring certain tax foreclosed properties as surplus, authorizing the sale of the properties pursuant to the city of Sheridan, and ordering distribution of proceeds, tax lot number R5635AB 1400 and tax lot number R5635BD 2300 and tax lot number R5634AA 7500 and tax lot number R5634AA 7500. I think that's repetitive. Is that
2 different account numbers.
okay? It just didn't specify, right? I will move approval of item 1A. Is there further discussion?
None.
None.
All right. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great. Thank you. Thank you, Jody,
Jody.
for all your help.
Thank you, Noelle.
And congratulations. I hope it works out for the best for everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks
Yeah.
very much.
All right. Anybody need to take a break? No? We're good?
Oh, good.
Okay. Gather my stuff here. Okay, our second public hearing is a public hearing to provide information and an opportunity for public input regarding a proposed strategic investment program agreement between Yamhill County and Hampton Lumber Mills Incorporated, an Oregon corporation pursuant to ORS 285C.600 285C.620 and ORS 307.123. And I will open the public hearing and invite any testimony, public testimony for this particular item. And I see it looks like Mrs. Boyer is online with her hand raised.
Chair, is it appropriate now for us to declare any conflicts of interest? I'm not sure I need to declare a conflict, but I'm going to.
Yes, now would be the time.
Okay.
Okay, I'd like to declare a potential conflict of interest because I own timber deferred property in Yamhill County and just want to put that on the record. I don't see it having an impact on my ability to make a decision impartially, but I just want that information on the record.
Great, thank you. I would also like to declare a potential conflict of interest in this matter because my business has done work in support of the natural resource industry in Oregon. My husband and I own 2 agricultural related businesses, and my family owns an agricultural business and processing facility as well. However, I don't have any direct conflicts of interest with Hampton Lumber.
I would also like to declare just a general conflict of interest because of the natural resources and the connection to ag industry, and I am in the ag industry. But it will not affect my decision-making, and I have no direct contact with Hampton.
Great, thank you. Okay, Mrs. Boyer, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Floor is yours.
Can you hear me?
She's speaking, but we can't hear. Here we go again.
Sorry, we couldn't hear you before. Can you say something? We
All
are,
right.
oh,
Yo.
now we
we
can hear
go.
you. Sorry, we were fixing our audio.
Well, no, mine, it was tweaking on this end too. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
All right. I sit before you today wearing my hat as chair of Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District. In regards to the Oregon Strategic Investment Program Agreement, the Willamina Sawmill. The Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District would like to thank you for the opportunity to give public testimony today regarding the Oregon Strategic Investment Program Agreement between Yamhill County and Hampton Lumber Mills. The primary mission of Yamhill Soil and Water Conservation District is the furtherance of efforts to conserve natural resources in Yamhill County. We are fortunate in that we have taxing authority, which provides us a modest source of revenue for district operations. While we understand that we won't necessarily lose any tax revenue, the thought of foregoing additional revenue over the life of the tax exemption is rather concerning. The district can do a lot of good with the revenue we will forego. While the district is not against development, we feel it is important to recognize the impact this tax exemption has on the district. As more tax exemptions are utilized within Yamhill County, the cumulative impact it has on the district's revenue directly impacts the services we provide to the community. As the revenue received from our permanent tax rate is leveraged to acquire additional funding through grants and agreements, Even a small loss in revenue has a large impact on the district's overall funding and capacity. We very much see the need for smart, sustainable development as more people look to move into Yamhill County. We would like to find a way for local governments to finance the work needed and to provide the incentives that will draw the kind of businesses we all see as beneficial while minimizing the impact on the district and all small taxing districts in the county. We wish you the best of luck in your efforts and look forward to working with you in any way we can. Sincerely, Barbara Boyer, Chair, Board of Directors, Yamhill Saltwater Conservation District.
Thank you, Mrs. Boyer.
Thank you.
Commissioners, do you have any questions for Barbara? No? Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Okay, any further public comment? Either online or in the audience? You're welcome to come forward. Is now the appropriate time?
Absolutely.
for-
Yeah,
okay,
sure.
please come forward. And if you could state your name and address for the record, we'd appreciate it.
I'm Katie LaValle, my address of employment, is that what you say address?
Yes, yes.
100 Southwest Barnes Road, Suite 200, Portland, Oregon, 9722225.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Chair Burchauer, my name is Heath Curtis with Hampton Lumber with the same address. I didn't know how you wanted to proceed per se. I think most of you are pretty familiar with the project. That said, I don't know that we've given public comments before, and I've kind of got some comments teed up if you'd like to hear them. Some of it may be old to you, but I'm happy to run through them.
Happy to. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, Katie is our tax director. We have the privilege of working for Hampton Lumber. And as the name implies, we make lumber. We do that with 10 sawmills in the Pacific Northwest and a number of remanufacturing facilities around the country. One of our sawmills is in Willamina, Oregon, and it's the company's first sawmill. 80 years ago, Bud Hampton owned a lumber yard in Tacoma, Washington, decided he wanted to try and vertically integrate it, and he bought the Willamina Lumber Company. 4 years later, the sawmill burnt to the ground, and he proceeded to rebuild it. And after surviving the timber wars of the 90s, the Great Recession, and a global pandemic, today that sawmill produces approximately 350 million board feet of lumber, and that's about enough lumber to build approximately 25,000 homes. And the direct and indirect employment associated with that sawmill well exceeds 1,000 jobs. We're proud of our involvement in the Willamina community, and a flyer that I left up front that anybody's welcome to grab describes a few of the many charitable efforts that we support in the area. So the Willamina story is one of overcoming hardships and finding success, but the road ahead is looking pretty grim. When I say we make lumber, I mean to say we take trees growing in the woods and we turn them into the only truly renewable building product. Make no mistake though, that requires we cut down trees. And the number of the trees available to harvest in Northwest Oregon is shrinking precipitously. Given the impacts of the Labor Day fires, the Oregon Department of Forestry's HCP for state lands and the Private Forest Accord regulating management of private lands, the Beck Group estimates that annual harvest in Oregon over the next 40 years will fall by more than 490 million board feet. That would, with modern recovery factors, that would produce approximately 1.2 billion board feet of lumber, with projected losses of 7 sawmills and 5,390 jobs. That'll be a devastating blow to the industry. Know also that sawmills can't really just slow down and consume fewer logs. As your fixed costs are spread across fewer units of lumber, your manufacturing cost for each unit necessarily goes up. That is to say, you've got the same land costs, you've got the same machinery costs, you've got your personnel. As you decrease the amount of wood that's going through your sawmill, the unit costs, that is to say, your fixed costs are spread across fewer units, your unit costs go up. In a commodity market, if you can't command the manufacturing cost, then you either sell at a loss or your lumber stacks up without sales and the sawmill curtails. So in the face of a shrinking log supply, Hampton's got a couple options. In fact, all the sawmills in Northwest Oregon have a couple options. The first option is to sit back and run the value of the asset out before eventually closing the mill. That's happening. I can't speak directly to who, but there are mills in that position today. The other option is to lean into the competition and fight to be among those standing when the dust settles. Hampton's chosen the latter path, and I'm excited to be a part of it. But as we saw in the 90s, sawmilling markets don't tend to sort out rationally. As the sawmill begins to lose money, the owners are often reluctant to give up. They're hoping for more profitable conditions to return, and they like the people they're employing. They're trying to preserve those jobs. And so what happens is that everybody starts losing money, and the shakeout in the sawmill business can be really bloody. It can be really tough. So that brings us to the reason for today's meeting. To remain competitive, as I described, Hampton proposes to invest approximately $150 million to renovate the Willamina sawmill. It's a 9-digit investment in Yamhill County. The Willamina plant site is actually comprised of 2 sawmills, a twin sawmill that takes medium logs, and a quad sawmill that takes larger logs. Our redevelopment plans involve consolidating those sawmills into a single mill, retaining the existing boiler, dry kilns, and planer. We intend to do all of this while continuously operating the current sawmills. So we're going to have 2 sawmills running and building a 3rd one on the site, all at the same time. So that's a big investment Hampton is proposing to make in Yamhill County. The reason I'm before you today is to discuss the strategic investment program. That legislation authorizes local jurisdictions to ease companies like Hampton into the property taxes triggered by large developments. In that manner, communities can recruit investment. You can actually incentivize making that expenditure in the first instance. And 2, you can ensure that those investments remain competitive over time. That is to say, it makes it more likely it was a good bet. Hampton's here asking Yamhill County support for our proposed redevelopment of the Willamina Mill. The way the strategic investment program works for a project like ours is the first $25 million is taxed at the ordinary rate, and the remainder is styled as exempt for a period of 15 years. During that period, the value of the non-exempt property increases over time, and the savings from the exemption decreases over time. By statute, this is also coupled with a community service fee, which amounts to 25% of the tax savings that would otherwise be realized on the exempt property, which is paid to the county, and the county has broad latitude in using and distributing those funds. The end result is a meaningful tax savings as the company's eased into its property tax obligations on the full investment. As for the math on our project, at no point will taxes be paid be less than we pay today. Rather, total property taxes will immediately double. As a result of this investment, which will still be a tax savings to Hampton relative to operating without a SIP agreement in place. Should Yamhill County support this SIP agreement, our Willamina sawmill will be better situated to weather that storm I talked about, that we know is coming, that is coming. We're looking for every savings we can, knowing that it will take many partnerships to ensure our company's success. 4 generations of the Hampton family have been attached to the Willamina sawmill. It's truly a gem in our company. This investment, combined with Yamhill County support, we hope will ensure the mill remains a valuable employer for many generations to come. This maybe is the part where we transition to the more lawyerly part of the conversation. I have had the privilege over the last couple months to work with County Council. Mr. Bronish has been very helpful in helping me understand what the process is at the county, and I think that we've done some good work on a document that I'm of the impression you may have all received. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the process is from here. I could talk you through what that document looks like. It may also be that Christian has intentions to do that, or you have other plans.
I think we were probably going to wait for our more technical questions when we get to the discussion.
That's fine too. And then
Okay.
if you like, if the board has questions, you could come back up at that point. If you had a couple of general things you wanted to address now, that would be fine too. But I think that's right. The more technical questions about the provisions in the agreement, probably best for after the hearing's closed.
No, I think that's right. And in full disclosure, the agreement is the statutory terms that builds in the programs from the statute with a couple modifications requested by the county.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Hey, is there any further public comments on this item? Okay, hearing none, I will go ahead and close the hearing. And we will consider item 2A, which is consideration of approval of a strategic investment program agreement between Yamhill County and Hampton Lumber Mills, Inc., an Oregon corporation pursuant to ORS 285C.600-285C.620, ORS and ORS 307.123. And so commissioners, just to make sure we covered potential conflicts of interest out of an abundance of caution earlier. I don't think we need to do it again. But I would like to invite our tax assessor, Derek Worf, up just in case there's questions on the agreement. So this agreement was crafted in large part based on statute and what is allowed in terms of the structure of the SIP agreement. There's basically three parts that we've incorporated. Number one is the community service fee, which is part of the statute, but it's basically 25% of you have the technical legal language. It's 25% of
the assessed value of the product.
Okay, I don't want to state it wrong. And so that represents roughly $356,000 is what we had calculated out.
The initial community service fee is estimated to be about 350,000.
350,000, okay. And that is an annual fee, essentially, that is charged to Hampton.
It's an annual fee device under first by statute.
Okay.
And it's sort of, it's the baseline for the program, it's a state by statute program.
Right, okay. The second part of this is something that we had discussed in conjunction with West Valley Fire District, because they are the largest taxing district that would be impacted.
I'm not sure if it's to the county or West Valley, but the county and West Valley together
The
are by
other.
far the two largest
Right.
taxing districts that would be impacted by this program.
Right, so we wanted to make sure West Valley was okay with this. We did meet with them, and of course, they expressed concern, just like Mrs. Boyer has expressed about impact to their district. And they also expressed the need for, based on this particular structure, the new mill that would be built, that they would probably be required to have a ropes team in terms of their ability to respond to any emergencies at the new mill. Ropes teams seem to have gone away a long time ago. McMinnville perhaps had one at one point, but is no longer. So in order to be able to respond to that area appropriately, they put together a budget for a ropes team and what it would cost for equipment, personnel training, et cetera. And so there is a one-time charge or fee of $200,000 to cover the cost of a specific ropes team for West Valley Fire for the duration of 15 years. I do have a question about that later, as it
Okay.
stipulates in the agreement. And then the third part is what commissioners had discussed in an executive session about making sure that there were funds not only for impacts to the county and other taxing districts, but also perhaps the city of Willamina. And, how this would impact the city long-term. Hampton is incredibly generous locally in the community, but we wanted to make sure there was a mechanism for funds to be distributed in case there were, critical infrastructure needs that perhaps needed to be covered, unforeseen. We had a discussion about impacts to roads and all of those kinds of things. And so there's really three parts to this in terms of the specifics between the community service fee, the additional percentage of what's stipulated now is 9% in the contract, and then the money for the fire ropes team. So I think now would be a good time to kind of review impacts to taxing districts on a higher level and just make sure that we understand. Because I know we had questions about soil and water
Sure,
and how this would affect them.
sure. So absent this program, I'll just speak holistically, any new development throughout the county would be brought on for the current tax year. We would tax it depending on which taxing district it's in or collection of districts. And then the revenue generated would go into a general distribution. What that means is all the money collected via the tax mechanism goes into a large pot. And then based on a distribution schedule, everybody gets a piece of it. So an improvement in Willamina would have some impact on every district in the county. Because as that money would go into the general pool and everybody has a percentage of the general pool, that's their impact. With the program, you still have a portion of the first 25 million will be taxed and it will go into the general pool and be distributed. And then the abatement or the tax exemption is where you have the impact. Because what's not being collected on that is actually there's other fees in lieu of the tax that we're talking about. And those are not distributed through a general mechanism. Those would come directly back to the county. So the community service fee will have its own agreement and discuss how that's distributed. And then you've in the version I read of the 200,000 to the fire or Grand Ron fire response was very specific. The additional 9% would be on the but for this program tax amount less, that the way it's written would be less the community service fee that was paid. So if you think of the total abatement and then subtract out the community service fee and then calculate 9% on that, you get to a dollar amount that will come back to service what you're indicating as potential local impacts for Willamina in that area. I brought, for what it's worth, I brought the the distribution list from 2022, so it'll be something similar. Put things into perspective. So the county as a operation receives 17% of the general distribution. When we get down to soil, water, and conservation group, they're at 0.25%. So, and their distribution was very similar to West Valley Fire. Is that what it's called? Yeah, West Valley Fire District. Their distribution is similar in dollars. They both have different tax rates, but the footprint that tax rate is applied to for soil and water is the entire county.
Right.
West Valley Fire has a smaller footprint, but a higher tax rate. Those two equations come out to almost be identical. So I think we looked at 4,200 as an annual impact to West Valley Fire. 4,200 would be the same impact for soil water conservation. So they both collect somewhat similar in total tax revenue. They're both in the $400,000 total tax revenue. $4,000 for each of those is where that I'll call it a loss, but it's not really a loss because it's not a reduction.
Right.
Potential they would have had, but they
Right.
didn't recognize.
Right.
And so that same formula would work for all districts. If you take the abatement less the community service fee and you get into what would have been, you can take their distribution rate and figure out pretty quick what the impact in dollars is.
And Derek, just to clarify that revenue impact doesn't take into consideration the community service fee. That's just the difference on tax revenue.
What would
Right.
have been?
Right.
Okay.
Absent everything, it's if we put it on without the SIP program,
Right.
the impact would be X. Now it's not all but forced, because I think it was the Keith, I think mentioned there is a portion, notwithstanding the SIP program, there's a portion, or excuse me, with the SIP program, there's still a portion that's going to go on. The 25 million will go into the general. So it's not the entire amount being reduced in the distribution. It's everything above 25 million being reduced. So there's a little, yeah. Without the program, it's 5,100 that would have gone to West Valley Fire. Okay, with the program, they lose out on 4, but they still get 1,200 or whatever it is because of that first 25.
So it's a reduction of the increase.
And then
Yes.
whatever we agree with them and the other districts under the community service fee, they'll get a portion of that
Right.
presumably. as
And
well.
there, you could make that, I mean, in theory, this is putting you guys on the spot. You could make them whole through the community service agreement.
Right.
You could pay them the 4,000 out of that
Right.
and
Or out of this additional annual.
right, or out of that
as well.
9% additional. I mean, those funds are, they don't go through the distribution. So how that gets handled is solely through agreements in your discretion.
A question about that 9%, Chair, if I may. I know we talked about it being a between, this was sort of a ballpark
Mhm.
in between. So can you give me some specifics about how we landed on that and what we're looking at that? In other words, once the county recoups that, what are we doing with it?
I can tell you what the number looks like.
Right.
The reason for the number or where it goes, that, I don't know, I'll leave that to you guys, but at 9% net of the community service fee, which is how the final draft came out. So there's a tax abatement, then they pay 25% on that for the community service fee. If you take that out of the what would be taxes, you get a lower number, times that by 9%, you're looking at 90,000. And that would adjust over time based on sort of flowing through the equation. So as the tax abatement decreased, that 9% would decrease. Albeit what I've looked at preliminarily, I don't see as rapid of a decline in terms of the value of the asset and the tax liability as what was presented maybe in some other ways. But
In some,
yeah,
in some agreements, those additional amounts had been spelled out, right? Each year, first year, 90,000, second year, 85,000, third year, 80,000. We chose not to do that. We certainly could do. And if the board wanted to talk about that, that's an option. Instead, we landed on a percentage, and I landed on that percentage coming out of the discussions that we had both around what different percentages might yield, and then also what sort of annual amounts the board had discussed. And then when Heath and I went over the language that I'd proposed and ran some numbers, it looked like that percentage roughly equated to the annual amount that the board had been previously discussing. So that's how we landed on that percentage. It seemed to correlate to the number that the board had previously discussed. And it is projected to decline.
yeah. So
incrementally each year
the,
as
the two factors affecting the decline of the tax abatement, the exemption would be the portion that is taxable, the initial 25 goes up 3%. Assuming that the whole value does not go down, then that 3% kind of works its way into the exemption portion. The other piece being if the asset is, or the assessed value as we've appraised it, decreases, then the net tax would decrease, the exemption decreases that way. So
And that's part of depreciation, sorry.
yeah, I don't mean to give a class in depreciation, but income producing properties don't depreciate on physical depreciation typically. Right? So it can be 15 years old as long as it's producing at an income level that's relevant to what the return on the investment was initially, then the value of it's the same. Right? In terms of appraisal concepts. Unlike a house where, the first year it's built, it's worth X, physical depreciation on the house matters. Well, if the market's hot and it's an old home going through regeneration or regentrification or something, it could still hold value. So we have to be careful on when we look at long-term impact of this particular program. Some of the numbers I'm looking at indicate that it diminishes significantly over time. I would suggest that it does not diminish as a straight line depreciation. It's going to be, it would ebb and flow with the market because it's an income producing property. So the value of the asset will follow that versus just a physical X% per year.
Okay.
So when I forecast out what is the impact of this long term, and I'm suggesting a total tax abatement in that $13 to $16 million concept, it's because I'm not taking straight line depreciation on the asset down to a half of what the initial investment was. I think it'll hold its value substantially over the 15 years.
So just some clarification, the community service fee, that is an amount equal to 25% of what the taxes would be. And that's every year.
Correct.
Okay, so then we add the additional annual improvement amount, which is 9%, which is equal to 9% multiplied by the amount equal of it. So in other words, it's almost like, and I'm wondering, in terms of the formula for doing this, and maybe this is a question for our state. Arthur can address this. I'm just looking at this in terms of this being sort of like a double whammy.
So we actually tried to avoid that by setting it up the way that we did, because this 9% is based on a calculation after you have already taken out the community service fee. So it's only 9% on what remains after you remove the amount of the community service fee. So it was kind of, the intent was not to end up with either a double tax or a double rebate, but just try to track it correctly. And I'm probably not speaking nearly as technically.
Well, I'll try to
correct
make
about
it,
that
I can make it
because
simple.
we-
If the tax bill would have been. But the SIP's in place, the 25 million's on the, going to general. Okay, the exemption portion. Without this program would have been $1,000,005, $1,000,004. Okay, then they pay 350,000. You take that off the 1,000,004. Now you're down to 1,000,000. Times that by 9%, you get 90,000. So it's not double dipping. We're not going back to the original abatement amount
Right.
and applying 9%. We're netting out, giving a credit, if you will, for the community service fee first, then lowering that abatement amount and then applying 9%. Had we gone back to the 1,000,004 at 9%, you'd be getting 125,000 annually instead of 90. So
Thank you.
I don't see it as a double. Right?
Okay.
That's still on the table. I mean, going gross would, you could do that too.
Okay.
And just to be
The
clear,
agreement's not final.
the percentage is simply a percentage that I selected based on the conversations we have. If the board wants to consider a smaller percentage or a different calculation or no additional amount at all, the board is certainly free to do that.
One other thing administratively, let's not get too creative in whether we go with a dollar or a percentage. Either one of those works in terms of administering the program for us, but getting too far off that center lane could be problematic.
Right. So we talked about the impact to West Valley and soil and water, the county's impact. Do you have that number?
Brought my handy dandy little.
But for the SIP agreement, we
You-
would
you-
have
you're-
received.
Yeah, and you mean the county
Mhm.
as a body.
Yeah.
1 second. The right number is 0. 240,000,
Okay.
238 and some change,
Okay.
based on a tax abatement of $1,000,004. That's
Okay.
17% of that. That's what our distribution is. So in theory, that whole million X would go into the general. And then our 17% of that would be 230 some thousand.
So I went back and listened to the executive session. I think that our number one concern is to make sure that we could potentially make the overlapping taxing districts whole, at least. It sounds like the community service fee would do that, unless I'm missing a significant taxing district,
The school,
the school,
the school district would be the second one.
but they are not technically impacted by the SIP agreement. They're not part of the equation.
Yeah, that was my understanding. I thought the districts that were impacted were the county, West Valley, soil and water, and ESD.
Well, everyone's impacted. The ones that you brought to the table on the community service agreement
Right.
excluded government and education.
Okay. And that's
Per the
correct
statute.
per the program.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
So
So
that-
we're talking, maybe we're talking,
Yeah.
past each other, but
Because I mean, everyone's affected,
There
every
will be-
taxing district
sure.
because of the
In that
concept of the
sense,
general
yes.
distribution.
right.
Right.
When it comes to the community service fee, the only entities involved in the
agreement.
discussion about distribution would be those four.
Those four. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are the four that are required.
Um, The other discussion that so with the community service fee, just to review, that is going to be a separate process where the county brings together potentially stakeholders from each taxing district, and we have a discussion about how that's going to be distributed every year.
Correct. Yeah, if the board approves of this agreement, we would send the agreement on to Business Oregon. I understand that's the final piece of the application that Hampton made to Business Oregon. So assuming Business Oregon approved the application, at that point, we would have 90 days to negotiate an intergovernmental agreement with at least those 4 taxing districts. And then
Okay.
in that agreement, we would come to terms on how the community service fee was to be distributed. And this is straight out of the statute. If the parties don't come to agreement after 90 days, then it kicks up to Business Oregon, and Business Oregon will determine how the community service fee is distributed.
I have a question for Arthur. Can you join us? Just sort of an overall general question that we maybe haven't had a chance to add to the narrative. Can you give us your name so we have that on record?
I'm Arthur Chapman with Business Oregon. I'm a regional development officer.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
So thanks for being here. So the question is the narrative in terms of overall and the SIP program statewide. What applications have you gotten in terms of ones that have been completed, and what is it looking like overall? What types of industries, what types of businesses, and do we have a track record?
I have a list on my computer if I can grab that. I actually have that tab open. So overall, what I would say is that SIP was intended to benefit manufacturers. Over time, that's changed a little bit. And there's a list on our website showing all the projects that are currently in the abatement process, and I can send that to Ken for distribution. Some of the big ones on here are Intel, and they show up a couple of times. Portland General Electric has several wind power stations and solar power stations that have used the SIP agreement out in Eastern Oregon. Genentech is a biomedical manufacturer in Metro. They've also used this program. Generally, the rural projects tend to be energy projects. So this is kind of an unusual one. I mean, it's a rural manufacturer, and I find that pretty exciting personally. So glad to see the SIP program under consideration for a rural manufacturing project.
And
Does that
those,
answer your question?
Yes,
Yeah.
it does. Thank you.
comparatively, those programs are typically 15 years. Is that per statute?
15 years
Okay.
is the statute, yes.
Okay. So those don't necessarily differ. There just might be multiple of them.
Right. So as your council noted, the language in the SIP agreement is pretty well set in statute, and you get to play with the community service fee and any additional things you want to layer into it. But we start with the bare bones agreement from the statute, and that's the starting place. And 15 years is true for all of those.
Mhm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's helpful.
Any other questions for Arthur?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So some of this is repetitive, but it's because we haven't had a public hearing before on this topic. So I just wanted to review, we did have a conversation, Derek and I, about the responsibility, obligation of the county when it comes to how we manage this program and how we treat the funds. I think we've seen some examples of neighboring counties who have relied on this funding for general operating expenses. And they get to the end of 15 years and oops, they have a big cliff that they're coming off of in terms of how they've managed the money. So we don't want to be in that position. This is a temporary sort of restructure of how funds come in. Now, granted, those counties will have significant increases in assessed value in terms of those properties coming back on the rolls completely. But it's, what I've seen are some red flags in terms of the habits of some county governments and how they treat the money to supplant perhaps general operating expenses. And we've cautioned against doing that in this county. So Are there any other questions for, I'm looking through the tax implications. Are there any other questions for Derek? In
Yes.
terms of, okay, take it away.
So off of what Chair Bershauer just said, at what point or what year, if you can pinpoint it, are we, our 3% increase plus our 25%? So our 3% increase on the base tax that it exists now, and then our 25%, at what point the decline in that passes the increase for what's there and that 25%? Is it right in the middle? Is it 7.5 years? Do those cross or?
I don't think so. So the question becomes, at what level does the asset diminish low enough that the 25% original or 25 million original exceeds what we're getting already in the community service fee? It would take a notable fallout in the market for that to happen. When we look at it in terms of all property types, the reason that their maximum assessed value and assessed value is set a certain way is to create a gap between that and real market value to handle the fluctuations of the market and keep your 3% consistent. So the idea that the real market value would drop below the assessed value and so far below that the gap for exemption would shrink to a point that's less than the 25 million in terms of a tax base. I don't see it in 15 years.
Right, because your depreciation would have to fall more than your 3%, because your 3% is less than.
That's exactly right. So if
may
you were,
not even
if you,
catch it.
at 7.5 years is a straight line depreciation, you're saying there's a fixed amount of depreciation every year until the end. And at the end, it's either 0 or 50%. That's not how income producing properties work.
And this is where the question comes in, where Hampton is formulated one way and the county is formulated another way.
Yeah, they're projections.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at it as a more historically on this market and how this market's performed. And I think maybe the approach was something different in terms of a cost-based approach. The equipment cost X on this date, and then there's a physical depreciation attributed to the equipment. That is what I read into what was proposed. I don't, it changes the scope of the overall impact of the program, right? I think does it benefit the county? I think the approach that the depreciation is more level than straight line means that the contributions back to the county via the community service and the 9%, I think they're more stable and would be higher longer term.
Right.
So
So to throw one more kink in this,
Mhm.
there's nothing set in stone on that. If we're basing our 9% off of the above and beyond the 25 million. Hampton comes in year 4 or 5. They're like, hey, we scheduled a faster depreciation. We don't think this is fair. So they come before BOC. And let's just say that everybody does not agree and it goes to the next level. And we are now on a straight line with Hampton versus what we thought it should be. And that directly affects now our 9% they were getting. So we cannot set an actual dollar amount or plan on a dollar amount that we're going to be receiving over this next 15 years. Year 1, we're pretty confident.
sure,
Maybe 2.
on a percentage basis, no, but you could also put a fixed amount in, and then you would know it. So you could forecast out the total and create an average and call that average an annual payment at a fixed amount. That would be an option to sort of recoup the same. Then you'd really be getting into whose forecast do you like better?
Okay, so this comes to my third is, can you give me a line of where Hampton believes it is, a line where Yamhill County believes it is? And
I could provide the Yamhill County version. I'm only speaking to
can you
what
project based on what you are the ebb and flow of
Uh-huh.
depreciation versus Hampton's straight line depreciation? Give us 2 columns of numbers from year 1 to 15 that we can compare and see potentially what the impact is by year 15.
I think we could do that. I didn't bring that today. I have a number in my mind what it'll be over the 15 years. And I think there might be a total at the end of the table that was presented for the sum of the abatement originally. I don't know if that's still current. Christian had one on his PC too, but
Do you have that, Heath? Yeah,
Sure.
would you?
I don't have that table in front of me.
Did that spreadsheet in the green line have it?
Chair Birchow, commissioners, thank you. Thank you for welcoming me up here. Just a quick comment on the rate of depreciation. That's actually a really sophisticated conversation, as he indicates. And it's a conversation that we have with almost every taxing jurisdiction we're in. I think though, maybe the way to think about it here is that your likely returns, given what the assessor has described, are almost certainly higher than what I have described to you. That is to say, what he's saying is that the delta in terms of savings is larger, meaning when you apply the same percentage, that will produce a larger revenue number for you. And so to the degree that that's true, that kind of is what it is. We're willing to engage on a conversation on what the appropriate depreciation schedule is for this, plant site. I think you're right. Some of the methodologies hinge on income and income production, and not just depreciation of the equipment over time. At the same time, this is a rapidly developing industry, and as the equipment becomes less performant relative to our competitors, then one can anticipate it will also produce less revenue, that is to say less
Or new
profits. And so it kind of runs both ways, and it's hard to know now how that's going to play out. We both, I think, as partners in this, kind of bet on the come on how that's going to play out. And it is a conversation that we are very familiar with in dealing with our annual tax assessment, trying to figure out whether, we agree with the county's depreciation schedule. I don't anticipate that conversation is going to go away, whether on this or otherwise.
Okay.
And so the difference, I don't have like the total number that I have for purposes of the 9% after eliminating the CSF comes to about $850,000 over 15 years. I haven't actually seen your number. I'm certain it's higher. That is to say, because you would apply it against a larger tax abatement in each year. So I think it would probably be safe to say your likely revenue would be more than $850,000. How much more is difficult to know today.
Yeah. I would agree with that.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay.
even at flat line without depreciation, and you use 90,000, say 80 over 15 years, and you can do the math on that to get a relative comparison
Mhm.
to 900,000. So more like 1.6 million for my book. But the depreciation would come into play. And it's something that we do deal with every year on every property. When somebody comes to BOP, we disagree, then we go to magistrate, and then we go to tax court.
See, for me, I'm just trying to get general numbers. I don't want to sign on in my head, be like, oh, it's 90 grand a year. I want to see the 15-year number.
Yeah.
And I totally understand it's a guesstimate. It's a guess on Hampton on how they're gonna, use our tax system with Bopton, whatever. I do the same thing to make sure everything's fair, but that will still give us a rough general idea of an average or what we can expect.
Right.
I don't want the expectation to be like, oh yeah, it's 90 grand a year.
And we would not be offended by a fixed dollar number either. Of course, again, what that fixed dollar number is a question as between kind of which line you pick in the first instance. And the question is whether we want to grapple with that now or let that play out over time. And again, we really appreciate the commission's support. We weren't expecting to see an additional clawback of this nature, but we're not offended by the request. There's a lot of flexibility here.
And so to Heath's point, I'm just taking your numbers, approximately 850,000 over 15 years. You divide that, about $56,666 a year.
Right.
At 70,000, it's $1.05 million. And at 80 or 90, it's $1.4 million total.
And you don't know where you're at with your,
I'm at the $1.3 million, $4 million.
Okay. Any further questions for Heath?
Thank you.
Thanks. So I guess where I kind of struggle with this is it's the next conversation that we don't have to have today, but it's coming. If we commit to a 9% amount. is why are we asking for that, right? We've had some discussion in general about where we think that money could go, what our concerns are in terms of impacts to the local community. We had discussion about road impacts with ODOT and all of that kind of stuff. Go ahead.
And if you'd like real quick, I can speak to that because coming out of that conversation, one of the questions the board had was, could we find out a little bit more about what,
Mhm.
from our county public works perspective, what they thought the impact to the roads might be. And I've had the same conversation with Heath and our public works director, based on the information I got from Heath, which is, consolidating the 2 mills into one new one, while there will be some additional heavy truck traffic during construction. Once the new mill is up and running, they don't expect the overall truck traffic to be that much greater or that much heavier than it is today.
Same production.
Is that about right? Okay.
Mhm.
And based on that, I discussed it with Mark Lago and while there were some resurfacing plans for the stretch of Willowmina Creek Road, I think that runs in front of the mill to possibly happen this year. That's being delayed while there's a water improvement project that's happening. And so what Mark and I talked about is if it makes sense to forestall the resurfacing until after construction is complete. That was one item to consider, but again, he also felt that the overall infrastructure and the beds of the roads were in good shape. So the one thing he and I had discussed is the possibility of working with Hampton on the construction schedule and possibly holding off on repaving that portion until after construction was complete. But otherwise, he didn't see more significant impacts to the roads beyond
And I
that.
think the other point that you brought up at some point was that it wasn't going to be limited to just around the mill, but that this was going to be countywide use of the road.
Potentially, yeah, but if there's no projected increase in the overall
Right.
truck traffic volume weight, then the impacts distributed across the system shouldn't be any greater than they are today.
Mhm.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt,
No,
but we had also discussed that, and I wanted to make sure
Right,
that I circled
right.
back on that.
I'll add that the collection of this will be collected, we'll bill it, receive it. And then it gets handed over to finance for wherever it's gonna land. This, unlike the community service fee, does not have an agreement tied to it. So if 10 years from now, the three of you aren't serving, you'll want to potentially have something in play that says this is what it was for.
Right.
If that's your intent.
Yeah.
I don't know if that comes in the form of a resolution or agreement or something, or.
It could just be a policy or some, some sort of a document that the board acts on that sort of guides how they would like. I mean, can't bind future boards could change that
True.
policy, but you could sort of have a framework for here's why we considered this, here's why we landed on this amount, and here's where we think would be good places for this annual amount to go.
Couldn't it be written into this agreement?
I don't know that it would.
No.
It certainly could be, but I don't know that it would be appropriate necessarily to do that. Because unless the board would want to have Hampton's input on when and how that 9% is spent. Because this is the agreement between Hampton and the
Yeah.
county for establishing the program. I would think Hampton would be an appropriate party to discuss where that 9% might go on an annual basis in conjunction with other stakeholders, right? The city, the school district, soil and water, economic
That's
development.
called the annual budget process.
Yeah.
Fair
Yeah,
enough.
just to be clear, there's no distribution that happens from the tax office. That's all I'm getting.
Right.
at. We don't send it certain ways. We just hand it over to finance.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, I just want to make sure that we're clear on why we're asking for that, if that makes sense, commissioners. I share frustration about the overlap and cumulative effect of some of these programs, like Mrs. Boyer mentioned. When you get into like urban renewal districts and all of those things that suck money away from core services, right? Unfortunately, we tend to be the only ones testifying against them, but the thing that I like about this program is that it is short-term. Some of our urban renewal districts are 40, 45, 50 years, which is insane, but it's short-term. The investment is coming from the private sector, and there is a mechanism to make the taxing districts whole, at least in the immediate.
And
So that's the attractive piece about this. And there seems to be a lot of flexibility and transparency over where the money goes. It's not an administrative mess in terms of how urban renewal districts are run. It's pretty clear cut. So I just want to make sure that we know why we're asking
Yeah.
for 9%.
And it's not 100% either. Like the renewal districts, it's, capped at where you were at, and then you get that 3% increase that goes towards the
Mhm.
renewal district. This is, you got a 25% automatic of new taxing for any new equipment put in. And then, any asks above and beyond that. So it's a little bit different than I would think a renewal district.
One of the concerns I had when I took a look at this is, are we asking for it because we can? Because it's sort of baked into the formula, if you will, as an option. So I don't want to pile on just because we have, we have Hampton coming to us, making a request, and then we come back and we say, okay, but, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do that. And it's almost like we're doing it because we can. So that 9% is I'm a little concerned about, are we doing it just because we can? And then we don't have an end game for it. So I want to make sure we're clear about the ask and then where that's going to go.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I could see it going down that road if it was a back and forth 6 times. This was, I thought we were pretty clear up front what our intentions were. We were asking for examples of other SIP agreements. And so I thought we were pretty clear. It seems Hampton is, they're not mad at us for putting it on there. They agree. I don't know. This is interesting because you start capping your 3% growth. And so you're going to end up losing somewhere in the end, and you have to start making up for that somewhere
Mhm.
because we have going through budget. I mean, we cut 2% right off the bat.
I know.
And our,
Well, and that's where my mind is going. This is starting, the 9% is starting to feel like a bit of an insurance fund. So we hold it, we keep it, we let it compound. And if we have impacts in year 12, 13, 14, 15, then, we're dipping into it to cover whatever impacts are to taxing districts. Which is not consistent with what our original last conversation was, which is, are there impacts to roads? What about the city of Willamina? Are there impacts to water, sewer? Potentially with the city that we can be helpful with. That was kind of what the last discussion entailed. And also what's the long-term impact of the county? What do we need in terms of assessment of, tools, things that help us with that process. So I feel good about the community service fee being able to cover the expectation of making taxing districts whole, including the county, West Valley, Soil and Water. And our expectation is that they will be at the table for that.
yeah, because somebody's going to have to cover it within that taxing district. So that's going to be an interesting conversation. I'm not proposing this, but I just ran some numbers. So, and this goes to my questions of where the county thinks we're at from year 1 to year 15, where Hampton believes they're at from year 1 to year 15. And I'm just going to do the average if it was every year the same. So Hampton's about 56K a year for the 9%. The county would be about 86K a year average. And then a third number is if you stick with how Hampton has done theirs, but add in the almost 8,400 impact for West Valley Fire District and Soil and Water Conservation puts you at 64K a year. So there's 3 different numbers, averages from year 1 to year 15 on 3 different scenarios.
And I'll add my initial estimates for the cash equivalent tax abatement for Hampton is, in my mind, between 12 and 14 million over the 15 years. So it sounded like you were feeling like we were taking a 9% jab because we can. I don't think it should be lost that the savings to Hampton would be very notable.
Yeah, we certainly acknowledge
cash
that.
equivalent.
And,
Yeah, no, of
but I
course
want to
not.
make sure that we're not just like Commissioner Starrett said, we're not just doing it because we
need to reprice.
can. And if it's the lowest end of that 56,000, is that actually significant enough to meet the
that's a different thing.
expectations?
My point was just to give you the number.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
That's what I like. I like the numbers.
so based on your three calculations, you're comfortable with 9%?
I'm comfortable with the 9%. It's just how do you get there? Which avenue are you gonna follow? You're gonna follow what Hampton's depreciation schedule is or what Yamhill County's ebb and flow depreciation schedule is. Neither one of them is set in stone because of the programs that we have in place that, you know, BOPTA, and then they can appeal it, and then a third party board will decide true or not, but we still need a rough number that we can guide by. So right now, if we can almost run the numbers from what we can average and maybe make it a set number instead of it relying on that ebb and flow or a straight line trajectory, it might be better if we come with a solid number for every single year period and we can budget better accordingly over the next 15 years with a set number.
And you're suggesting we use an average of those three numbers?
I'm not. I'm giving you the three numbers so we can talk about how to set a number instead of doing a 9%.
Okay.
Knowing that we're shorting West Valley, we're shorting soil and water, and that was one scenario. The other one is our ebb and flow depreciation, and then the third one is the straight line depreciation for Hampton. So we have three numbers. Can we work those three numbers to make a set number to make budgeting easier over the next 15 years, knowing we have this much money coming in to go to X project?
I would be fine with a set number. I think it'd be a little bit easier, but
I think budgeting, what, if we set it on percentage, this thing will be a nightmare trying to, and to your comments earlier on, relying on this as a percentage would be worse than relying on it as a set number. We know exactly where we're at over the next 15 years. Anyway, that's just kind of my thought process.
Chief Budget Officer Puffer? No comment.
Because we'll work with whatever number we have. If it's a flat number, you're right. It does make it easier for forecasting and budgeting versus me bugging Derek every year to
Where do you
help
think
me
we're at with
out
this? Where do you think?
to try to navigate what that 9% is going to look like. But again, I mean, budget wise, that's what we estimate and we project with that. But if the number's a little bit different, if it's more, if it's less, we book what's actual and what we make available, the difference. So I think we can make either way work. Yes, it's much simpler if you know for the next 15 years that there's a flat amount that we're expecting a $60,000 check. That's much easier for budgeting purposes versus something that may fluctuate each year, but I'm not really too concerned either way. It's going to require some additional work and just like I do every year with the budget process, I'm always working with Derek on projections and numbers when it comes to general fund revenue. So
It was a really diplomatic answer.
yes. Well done.
you're welcome.
Commissioners, if you're willing, I think
Yes.
Yep.
Heath has
Heath,
something else he'd like to say. Thanks.
I just wanted to offer one additional piece of information, Commissioner. The flat fee might actually work for both of us. That is to say, to the degree that, you're comfortable settling on something that looks like that 9% number. One advantage of the flat fee to us is that the savings we realize are realized earlier, right? That is to say, under the schedule as it appears now, those savings are the costs associated with that 9% are really front loaded. And to the degree you pick that flat fee, it creates more certainty for you. It creates more certainty for us. And frankly, it backloads the tax obligation relative to
Right.
the 9%. And so to the degree you were comfortable proceeding down that path, Hampton would be too.
I thought that might be where you were going, something else, and we would have to have conversations with Hampton about a change to what was currently in the agreement, but, and I'm not obviously committing Hampton to anything, but when you and I had talked about the ropes team, for example, you said there was actually some fiscal advantages to that being a one-time upfront payment as opposed to spreading it out over 15 years. I don't know if that same thinking would apply to this other amount, if there could be advantages to possibly making a single larger upfront payment, or if they're different in that sense, but you don't have
Yeah,
to comment
no,
on it
yeah.
now if you thought, but that was just a thought that I
That's
had
what
about
it's
how,
about.
another way to possibly approach this, but we would have to talk with Hampton and work that out.
So one more number, if you average all three, about 69 grand.
Well, I was gonna say, if you make it, let's say it's a $75,000 flat amount every year, that's 1.125 million over the course without any type of, yay, me too. And so the delta between, the 56,000 or whatever was sort of on the low end of that is about 285, almost $300,000. It seems like that would be perhaps a better structure for all of us. I still my mind still goes to, pooling it, and keeping it, at least for the short term, to make sure that we really understand the impacts going through year 1, year 2, year 3.
I agree. See
So-
what starts popping up.
Yep.
Don't just go
Mhm.
next person that comes up and asks for some
Sure.
grant funding and be like, oh yeah, we got that. No.
Yeah.
I agree.
But the intention of the board, and perhaps we can memorialize this, is that we are taking care of our taxing districts and we are taking care of the community, the directly impacted community with whatever those funds.
This
Turn
isn't
out to be.
going to be, in other words, a discretionary or a slush fund in terms of us being able to, do aspirational type things that are not the core functions, and making county whole, taxing districts whole. And that's the purpose of this. So we don't, as Chair Burchell pointed out, wind up like Washington County.
Washington County, yeah.
And I would say it'd
No
probably,
comment.
it'd probably be worthwhile for those specific funds, at a later date when, if this is approved and settled on to, for the board to consider and adopt some type of policy document or policy statement around the use of these funds and limitations, because, we have needs all over the county, and if we have a fund that has, money's there, we're going to get a lot of requests over time. So if there is intention that these funds are going to be identified and targeted for specific purposes, and you want to put restrictions on that, the board could adopt a policy, and it doesn't require a lengthy, it's just basically a policy statement that says that's the intention of these funds. Much in the same way that we have like O&C funds and landfill license reserve, which are discretionary in nature, but historically you've used it for one-time projects that meet certain criteria. So
And there's no requirements on this fund that we would create.
No.
So how does that sound? Doing a flat fee?
I'm in favor of
I'm
that.
I'm totally on board with flat fee. It's just now coming down to figuring out what it is.
Right. So in terms of process, if the board's not ready to settle on a fee today, maybe set this item over for a week. I don't know how much time the board thinks we might need, how many more conversations you might want to have with my office or Derek's, but would a week, Heath, assuming we can get to a number and provide that to Hampton, would
I'm not
coming back in
sure.
a week be soon enough?
If I may, a week would be fine, of course, but I don't think there's any magic to
Yeah.
the number. That is to say, I'm not sure what we would learn in the course of that week that might inform your analysis.
Hmm.
I think it's probably on the commissioners just to pick where you think is fair, and and proceed.
I didn't
think-
want to
Yeah.
land on a number that
Assume,
you thought you might want to take back and have conversations with your
That's-
folks
yeah.
about before.
The good
the
news
board
about
acted on
having
it.
a vice president at the table today is that I'm here to speak for the company.
Great. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So question procedurally, would we be able to take action on this pending a number? Or can we agree on a number now?
I think you could do both. I think the latter would probably be preferable.
Mhm.
Unless there are significant questions that are going to require, time to sort of determine what that number might look like. If the board could reach a number today, I think in order to try and keep the process moving and to get the agreement considered, and if it's adopted, you know what I mean, get it to Business Oregon so the application can be approved. But I completely appreciate if the board feels it needs more time to determine what that number might look like. Yeah, you could, I guess in theory, approve it pending a number, but that's a little bit open-ended
Yeah.
for my taste.
Well, I would be in favor of us coming up with a number based on what we have. Is that something that everyone would be comfortable with?
I think so.
We've got a couple of numbers here. We've got a handful of numbers here.
I'm getting it narrowed down. So I would recommend the 69, which would be the average of all three of the that I've done. Chair Burschauer recommended 75. So if we split that, we're at 72. If you want an easy,
I like rounded numbers.
I like 70.
so. I guess
70, is that your suggestion?
72.
Is that your final answer?
What's between my number and Lindsay's number was 72. So that's,
Commissioner Sarah said 70.
No?
oh, you came with
Yeah,
a third number?
Kinda chimed in at 70.
Well, and it seems, a bit arbitrary and silly,
Yeah.
but, we really don't.
How else are you gonna decide though? I mean,
It's
you gotta
the
have,
cart before the horse in terms of figuring out where the money goes. And so it's just part of the process.
Yeah, and I think we've already, our consensus is in terms of where the money goes, is we know that we wanna. It's our rainy, rainy, rainy day fund.
Yeah, that 72, I think, comes in right at a recovery of another $1 million in tax revenues. So $1,080,000.
versus the 850, which it was.
Mhm.
So we're 150 more.
Okay, I'd be okay with that.
You said 72.
72.
72.
Would that be an amended, a motion to amend?
Yeah, it would be, I would suggest that approval of the agreement, within the section.
Twenty-two.
Yes.
4.2.4.
Do you see any red flags in that, Derek, if we do a set?
Yeah, it's quite easy.
Okay.
Much easier, actually.
And then,
Well, bless arm wrestling over 9%.
right, yes. And then Christian, as far as your point with the questions and just kind of put it out there, if it's that set amount on an annual basis, but if Hampton were to choose to pay that up, in one bulk amount or something like that, that would be okay with the agreement. They would still have that option either a year or it's paid annually.
And I think we would do that.
You'd prefer, okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
No other changes to the.
Are we at the point where we would like to make
No,
a motion?
Yes.
No,
No,
you're not.
no, yes, I am. No,
Okay.
I'm not. Yes, I am. I'm good.
Okay. So I will attempt to word this correctly. I move approval of a strategic investment program agreement between Yamhill County and Hampton Lumber Mills, Inc. and Oregon Corporation pursuant to ORS 285C.600 -285C.620 and ORS 307.123. With the amendment to section 4.2.4, changing the language to read a fixed annual payment of $72,000 a year paid annually. That
I think
work?
so.
Okay. Let me know if I need to.
No,
Redo it.
I think that's fine.
Okay, commissioners, further discussion?
You'd simply be moving to approve the agreement as presented with that one
With the-
modification.
with the modification. No further discussion. I do want to
No.
just thank the taxing districts for weighing in. West Valley was quite concerned upfront, so I want to thank them for weighing in. And Soil and Water and the representative with Mrs. Boyer. I think that we want to make sure, and we have, this has been consistent, we want to make sure that our taxing districts know that our expectation is that they are at least made whole, if not beyond that. So those discussions will come very soon. Within the next 90 days, that agreement will be set for the community service fee.
That's right. Yeah. If board approves the agreement and Business Oregon approves the application, then there would be 90 days
Mhm.
for us to work with the taxing districts to come to terms on the IGA.
Okay.
I just want to add one thing in terms of the economic development component of this. If we talk about family wage jobs and we talk about recruiting industries and we talk about retention of industries in Yamhill County, the return on investment in this particular project, we could spend all kinds of money on grants and trying to draw people to Yamhill County, but we have a 4-generation family in an industry that's been decimated because of political concerns. And these are really, they're good paying jobs. And what the West Valley was compared to what it is now as a result of what happened to this industry is really kind of sad. When you look at, there were numbers of car dealerships and banks, and people were able to generate generational wealth because of jobs in the lumber industry. And now we see how it's just been ravaged. And I would like to do everything we can to show that while Oregon might be hostile to this industry and to businesses in general, that in Yamhill County, we'll do everything we can to support not only natural resources, the timber industry, but all of our manufacturing and agriculture industries.
Right, and I would like to acknowledge Hampton for coming to the table and working with us. This is a risk. It's a risk for the company, considering what the discussions around the timber industry and what's coming in terms of those agreements. So we acknowledge that risk, and we're happy to partner. Okay, so the motion has been made. If there's no further discussion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Great, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to the end of our public hearings and on to announcements.
Tomorrow we'll be meeting with the Local Government Advisory Committee, and we're going to be talking a lot about the executive order funding for navigation centers and for homeless initiatives, and also be bringing before that group concerns that the Housing Authority and other organizations like it have in terms of we're caught in this in between. We're not an urban community, or we're not but we are rural, and we are now competing with the urban areas for grants. So we're going to try to get that sorted out. And the Family Wellbeing Council met. We had ODHS there, the CCO and the schools talking about a resource guide for our families that are perhaps maybe in jeopardy of involvement with the state on family issues. So that happened, and also Housing Authority, they purchased the Church Street home in Dayton. It closed the second week of May. And they also completed the construction on the Common Wall project in Lafayette. So you have two complete homes, and they have 3 market analysis on how to market those to lower income families.
Great, thank you. The Sheridan City County Dinner we had last Thursday, and that was wonderful to see so much representation there from cities throughout the county. We had a lot of good feedback in terms of, the county acknowledging our budgetary pressures. And I heard some feedback from mayors and city councilors that said that they appreciated hearing that because everybody's in the same boat. So, that was good to see, and really nice facility out there. And the state of the city, as we mentioned before, is tonight for McMinnville. And great to see Dayton break ground on the pedestrian bridge. The county gave $1 million for in ARPA funds for parts of that project. So that's wonderful to see. And just a reminder, Memorial Day boat races are this weekend, and county offices are closed on Monday, obviously. So what you got for
Everyone.
announcements?
Parks.
Parts.
All
Yes.
the letters are going up in the parks.
Saw that.
So grab your passports, start making the rounds. All your libraries, plus there's an extra list. Just go on the Facebook, like the Facebook page, follow the Facebook page. We're shooting for 1,600 followers, and we're also shooting to get out 400 at least passports. We're on track.
All right.
It looks good.
Are
We
the
posted
libraries-
one, you get one freebie. You don't really know what park it's at, but the post just shows a sign up in a tree. So you know what one letter is.
Those are tough clues. I was
There's
reading
some
through
real,
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
some people got really clever.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I noticed that.
but if you Get
Um,
a chance, go through it. It's pretty fun. And we, little bit of change to the passport this year. We thought we should make sure everybody knew who did each one of the
Yes,
clues.
yeah.
So
I thought that was
everybody's
really
name
nice.
is after
it's
each
Yeah.
nice,
clue.
very nicely done.
So you know who to blame if
That's
you
right.
can't
Yep.
find it.
I can't find it. We should put phone numbers next time. Next to
Right.
it.
Text so-and-so if you have trouble with this. So are the libraries keeping track of how many passports are given out, or are you guys just?
I think we know how many went out. So if we run out, or the ones that are returned at the end of the year, we can minus it off of what we ordered. So.
Okay.
that's Our rudimentary way of keeping track.
And you have prizes lined up already?
No.
No.
We're gonna wait to see what ages win.
Okay.
And then we're gonna go after prizes because it ends in September, end of September. And we won't give out prizes probably till November-ish, depending on when the Parks Board decides. So
Okay.
then it'll give us time to figure out what kind of prizes for age group that we should be getting.
Well, teenagers, they need motivation. So you might want to
Oh,
get
pick a
some gas
prize?
cards or something
Okay.
and dangle some carrots out there. You might have more
I'll make some phone
participation.
calls. That's all I got.
All right. Any further discussion or announcements for the good of the order? Nope. All right. I will adjourn our Board of Commissioners formal session for May 25th, 2020.